The first time I saw him, he nodded and walked past me. The second time, he appeared on a trail miles away. By the third time, I stopped believing it was a coincidence, because there was no possible way he could have gotten there before me. This happened during the fall of 2021. I spent a week backpacking through a remote section of Yellowstone National Park. I've always enjoyed solo hiking. The isolation, the scenery, the challenge. It's something I've done for years. And until this trip, I'd never experienced anything particularly strange. The route I planned covered multiple backcountry campsites over several days. Nothing extreme. Just a long trek through areas with relatively low visitor traffic. Exactly the kind of hiking I enjoy. The first sighting happened on my second day. Around noon, I passed another hiker heading in the opposite direction. Middle-aged. Dark backpack. Gray jacket. Nothing unusual. We exchanged quick greetings and continued walking. End of interaction. Or so I thought. Roughly 3 hours later, I saw him again. The exact same man, standing beside a completely different trail. Immediately, I felt confused, because the trails weren't connected. Not directly. Not quickly. The geography made no sense. Yet there he was. Same backpack. Same jacket. Same face. I remember convincing myself there had to be an explanation. Different route. Shortcut. Anything. The encounter felt strange, but not frightening. At least not yet. The following morning, I saw him again. And that's when things changed. Because this time he appeared near my campsite. My stomach tightened immediately. Not because he was close. Because he shouldn't have known where I'd be. Backcountry campsites are spread across large areas. Visitors typically reserve specific locations. Randomly encountering the same person repeatedly becomes increasingly unlikely. Still, I tried to stay rational. Maybe he had a similar itinerary. Maybe coincidence explained everything. Then something happened that shattered that explanation. Around midday, I stopped near a lake to eat lunch. The location sat well away from the main trail. A quiet area where I expected complete solitude. Instead, the man walked out of the trees, directly across the shoreline. The sight immediately made my stomach drop, because there was no trail there. No reason for him to appear there. No reason for him to know where I'd stopped. Yet somehow he did. For the first time, I genuinely felt uneasy. The man didn't approach, didn't speak, didn't wave. He simply looked toward me, then continued walking. The interaction lasted less than 30 seconds, but it stayed in my mind for hours. That evening, I changed my plans. Instead of following my original route, I selected a different trail system entirely. The decision added mileage, added difficulty, but it also provided peace of mind, or at least I hoped it would. The following afternoon, I rounded a bend in the trail, and nearly stopped walking, because the man sat on a log ahead, waiting, not resting, not eating, waiting. The moment he saw me, he stood up. My heart immediately started racing, because by then coincidence felt impossible. The odds simply didn't make sense. I considered confronting him. Instead, I kept walking. The man watched me pass, then fell in behind me, at a distance, not close enough to be aggressive, but close enough to notice. The next hour felt endless. Every time I looked back, he remained there, always the same distance behind, always walking, never speaking. Eventually I reached a ranger station. The moment the building came into view, relief flooded through me. I immediately informed park staff. Rangers took the report seriously, especially after hearing how many times I'd encountered him. One ranger agreed to accompany me, while another searched nearby trails. The search produced nothing. No man. No campsite. No trace. At least initially. Then another visitor reported something strange. A man matching the same description had apparently been observed near multiple backcountry campsites over the previous week. Always alone. Always watching. Never causing direct problems. Just appearing. The reports eventually prompted a larger investigation. And several days later, rangers discovered a hidden camp deep in the wilderness. Food supplies, equipment, notebooks, personal belongings, evidence that someone had been living there for quite some time. Months, possibly. According to investigators, the occupant appeared to move frequently between trails and campsites, observing visitors, tracking routes, watching people. The individual vanished before authorities arrived, and despite extensive searches, he was never officially located. Years later, one detail still bothers me. Because investigators recovered notebooks, and among the entries was a description of my backpack, written 2 days before our first encounter, meaning he noticed me long before I noticed him. The first whistle sounded friendly. The second sounded deliberate. By the third night, I stopped leaving my tent after dark, because whoever was making that sound kept getting closer. And every time I tried finding them, they disappeared. This happened during the summer of 2022. I spent a week camping alone in a remote section of Rocky Mountain National Park. I wasn't new to camping. I'd spent years hiking and backpacking. Solo trips never bothered me. In fact, I preferred them. The quiet, the isolation, the feeling of being disconnected from the rest of the world. Most trips were peaceful. This one wasn't. My campsite sat near the edge of a heavily wooded area. It wasn't completely isolated. Several other campsites existed nearby, but they were spread far enough apart that privacy wasn't an issue. During the day, everything felt normal. Families hiked nearby. Campers cooked dinner. Kids rode bicycles through the campground. Nothing unusual. The first whistle happened around 10 p.m. I was sitting beside a small campfire when I heard it. 3 short notes. Clear. Sharp. Human. I immediately assumed another camper was calling for a friend. Simple explanation. Nothing concerning. The whistle never repeated. At least not that night. The following evening, however, it returned. Same 3 notes. Same direction. Somewhere beyond the treeline. This time I paid closer attention. The campground remained quiet. Most visitors had already gone to bed. No voices. No movement. Nothing. Just the whistle. Several minutes passed. Then it came again. 3 notes. Exactly the same. My stomach tightened slightly, because now it felt intentional. Still, I wasn't scared. Not yet. The third night changed everything. Around 11 p.m., the whistle returned. Only this time it sounded closer. Much closer. Instead of coming from deep in the woods, it seemed to originate just beyond the campsite boundary. The sound immediately made me uncomfortable. I grabbed a flashlight and walked toward the treeline. The woods looked empty. Nothing moved. Nothing reflected my light. Nothing made noise. Then the whistle sounded again. From farther away. Almost like whoever made it had moved. The realization bothered me, because it felt less like somebody randomly whistling, and more like somebody avoiding being seen. The following morning, I mentioned the whistles to another camper. The man's expression immediately changed, because he'd heard them too, several times, for nearly a week. That answer made my stomach drop, because now I knew it wasn't my imagination. Other people were noticing it. The next night, I decided to stay awake. If someone kept whistling, I wanted to know who. Around 10:45 p.m., the sound returned. 3 notes. Then silence. I switched off every light and listened carefully. Several minutes later, I heard something else. Footsteps. Very faint. Moving through leaves. My heart immediately started pounding, because the footsteps weren't on a trail. They were circling the campsite. Slowly. Methodically. Always just beyond the reach of my flashlight. The movement continued for nearly 15 minutes. Then stopped. Complete silence. Then the whistle sounded again. Closer than ever before. The sound seemed to come from only a few yards inside the woods. I remember gripping the flashlight so tightly my hand hurt. Every instinct screamed at me to stay inside the tent. For once, I listened. The next morning, I found footprints. Fresh footprints. Along the edge of the campsite. Not animal tracks. Boot prints. Human. My stomach immediately dropped, because they formed a rough circle around my tent, as if somebody had walked around it repeatedly during the night. I reported everything to park rangers. The staff took the situation seriously, especially after learning other campers reported similar experiences. Whistles, footsteps, strange sightings near campsites, always at night, always near wooded areas. Rangers increased patrols immediately. For several nights, nothing happened. No whistles, no footprints, nothing. I started believing the problem was over. Then came my final night in the park. Around midnight, I woke suddenly. Not because of a noise, because of a feeling. That strange feeling that someone is nearby, watching. I remained perfectly still, listening. Then I heard breathing. Outside the tent. Very close. My entire body froze. The breathing lasted only a few seconds. Then footsteps moved away, slowly, into the darkness. A moment later, the whistle returned. 3 notes. From deep inside the forest. Farther away now. Retreating. I didn't sleep again that night. At sunrise, I packed immediately. Before leaving, I informed rangers about the breathing. The report triggered another search. This time, investigators discovered something disturbing. Several hundred yards from the campground sat a hidden campsite. Not an official campsite, a concealed one, carefully hidden among dense trees. Authorities recovered food supplies, blankets, equipment, and evidence that somebody had been living there intermittently. For quite some time, the individual responsible was never located, at least not while I was there. Years later, one detail still bothers me, because rangers showed me photographs from the hidden campsite. Among the recovered items was a notebook, and inside that notebook appeared sketches of several campsites, including mine, drawn before my final night, meaning whoever had been circling my tent wasn't randomly wandering through the woods. They already knew exactly where I was. The ranger didn't suggest we leave. He didn't recommend it. He didn't even explain it. He looked directly at us and said, "Turn around. Pack your gear. Leave the area right now." Then he walked away, and judging by the expression on his face, he knew something he wasn't telling us. This happened in September of 2021. 3 friends and I planned a 4-day backpacking trip through a remote wilderness section of Olympic National Park. The route wasn't especially dangerous. We'd completed harder hikes before. The area was beautiful. Dense forest, mountain valleys, long stretches of trail with very little visitor traffic. Exactly the kind of trip we enjoyed. There were 4 of us. Me, my friend Nathan, my cousin Kyle, and another friend named Eric. All experienced hikers, all reasonably prepared. Nothing about the trip felt unusual. At first. The first 2 days were incredible. Perfect weather, beautiful scenery, quiet trails, almost no other hikers. Everything went exactly as planned. Then we found the abandoned campsite. The site sat roughly a mile off the main trail. We discovered it accidentally while looking for a water source. At first glance, it appeared normal. A fire ring, a few logs arranged as seats, a flat area suitable for tents. Then we noticed something strange. The campsite looked occupied. Not currently occupied. Recently occupied. Food wrappers remained. A sleeping pad remained. Several pieces of equipment remained. Yet nobody was there. No hikers. No campers. Nothing. The scene felt wrong immediately. Because backpackers don't usually abandon useful gear. Especially not expensive gear. Still, we continued hiking. The discovery bothered us. But not enough to change plans. At least not yet. Several hours later, we encountered a ranger. The meeting seemed routine initially. The ranger asked where we were headed, how long we'd be staying. Normal questions. Then Nathan casually mentioned the abandoned campsite. Everything changed. The ranger's expression shifted instantly. Not panic. Not surprise. Concern. Real concern. He asked several follow-up questions. Exactly where was it? What equipment remained? Did we see anyone nearby? The questions felt oddly specific. Then came the warning. Turn around. Pack your gear. Leave the area right now. The statement stunned all of us. Naturally, we asked why. The ranger refused to answer. Instead, he repeated himself. Leave. Immediately. The interaction felt surreal. We eventually followed instructions. Not because we understood. Because the ranger seemed genuinely worried. So we changed routes. Packed camp. Started hiking toward the nearest trailhead. The problem was distance. We were still many miles from civilization. Leaving immediately didn't mean leaving quickly. It meant hiking until dark and hoping to reach a safer area. Around sunset, strange things started happening. Small things initially. A distant whistle. Then another. Then a third. Each one coming from different directions. The sounds immediately reminded me of something. Communication. The whistles felt deliberate. Structured. Intentional. Nobody in our group was making them. Yet they continued. Occasionally. Always distant. Always impossible to locate. The atmosphere changed immediately. Nobody talked much. Everyone focused on hiking. Then we found another campsite. This one looked even stranger than the first. Several tents remained standing. Empty. Food remained. Equipment remained. Everything remained. As if people had simply vanished. The sight genuinely frightened me. Because now we had two abandoned campsites. Within the same area. Neither made sense. Neither looked normal. The pattern felt wrong. Very wrong. Night arrived before we reached the trailhead. We had no choice but to establish a temporary camp. Nobody liked the idea, but hiking through unfamiliar wilderness in darkness would have been dangerous. So we stopped. The first few hours remained quiet. Then around midnight, Eric woke everyone, because he'd heard footsteps. Outside camp. Slow. Measured. Moving through the trees. My heart immediately started pounding. We listened carefully. The footsteps continued. Not approaching. Circling. Always outside flashlight range. Always hidden. The movement lasted nearly 20 minutes. Then stopped. Complete silence. Then the whistle returned. 3 notes. Close. Very close. Nobody slept afterward. At sunrise, we packed immediately. The moment daylight appeared, we started moving. Several hours later, we finally reached a ranger station. Relief flooded through all of us. That's where we learned the truth. Several weeks earlier, park authorities had been dealing with an individual illegally living within remote wilderness areas. The person repeatedly established hidden camps, observed hikers, moved through isolated sections of the park, avoided contact, avoided authorities, and occasionally left behind campsites when patrols approached. The abandoned camps we'd discovered apparently matched previous locations associated with the individual. The ranger hadn't wanted to explain details deep in the wilderness. He simply wanted us gone, as quickly as possible. The explanation made sense, mostly, but one detail still bothers me. Because before leaving the ranger station, we asked a final question. Had the individual been located? The ranger hesitated, then answered, "No." Years later, that's still the part one remember most. Not the whistles, not the footsteps, not the abandoned camps. The fact that someone had apparently been living in those forests for months. Watching hikers, watching campsites, watching people. And when we left the park, they were still out there, somewhere,